actually. Yeah, pretty, yeah.
Awesome, wonderful. Thank you so much. I have to start by asking, when the prospect of playing a character like this, a figure like this, somebody who has kind of transcended the public consciousness for so many years, enters your orbit, what goes through your mind?
Are you crazy? Yeah. Pablo had a sureness that was a little contagious. And I didn't have an incredibly defined impression of her before I made this movie, other than I thought she was very cool and very beautiful. And I remember the loss of her really impacting the world in a way that I took note of as a little kid. I remember the flowers, and I remember all of the crying faces, and I was like, what is this? And yeah, I mean, gosh, and at that point, I'd become obsessed with The Crown already. Like, I was doing all of my own kind of, like, you know, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but these people are unknowable, technically. Their experience is so unique that we cannot relate to that. And so it is all an outsider's perspective. And I think the fervence of wanting to know and wanting to get close to these people is something that defined her, because she was probably the most normal one of them. And ironically, even though she made people feel accompanied and empowered, and when she shed her light on people, it was like, you know, suddenly the world felt connected and you felt like beautiful about things. But really, she was the most lonely, isolated person that you could possibly imagine at certain stages of her life. So yeah, taking on all of these ideas, which those are only just a couple, that's the tip of the iceberg. I basically just had to say yes because I couldn't say no, because I had to try. I had to give it a shot. It was too sparkly to not. I was drawn to it. Yeah.
Well, and you know, I mean, as you said it there, and she was incredibly normal, incredibly accessible. But there was also, what was extraordinary about her, I think, is she was possibly the most ethereal member of the royal family as well. You know, that kind of coexisted. You know, she had the fairy tale, but it was a dark fairy tale. You know, there are so many contradictions here. I wondered, to a degree, was part of the joy of the role embracing those contradictions and playing with the lines in between them.
Absolutely. Yeah, the weird thing, as kind of heavy and hard and exhausting as it was to pretend to imagine to be her, I also took more joy into my actual body than I have ever in any other movie. And we deal with 3 days that are not particularly fun for her. We imagine a sort of precipice scenario in which if she doesn't make a pretty bold choice soon, that she's gonna lose herself. And yeah, there's so much about her that doesn't add up. And that's why I think it's just such a strange, it's like all she wanted to do was be normal and be known. But I think only in the last couple years of her life was she at a point where she knew herself, and that's what she fought for. So yeah, I think all of the parts of her are seemingly disparate. You know, people find her to be manipulative and conniving, and at times in interviews sort of to be trying to have an effect on people, trying to get a certain result from an interview or whatever. That's what we all do. I mean, if you were backed into a corner and felt like I'd be baring my teeth too. She also wore her heart on her sleeve to the extent that she couldn't hide anything. So yeah, it's funny. I don't think there's really any way to concisely sum her up, because she was just kind of getting to a stage where she could be fully realized and accepted, both self-acceptance and, you know, at large, the public accepted that she was unique and not a cartoon character.
Can I ask just sort of technically how you began trying to find her? I wonder whether for you it's about sort of working outside in, and it's the look, it's the clothes, it's the way of speaking, the accent, or whether it's more internalized, whether it's about emotion and heart and kind of trying to connect with, you know, just what she must have been feeling in these moments. Mm-hmm. Or a bit of both, maybe.
Both, yeah. I mean, it's so important to read everything, watch everything, pick apart every idiosyncrasy, every little nuanced way that she communicates and inhabits her body. And then it's really important to forget it and be present and enjoy it as much as you can, because yeah, if you'd be doing yourself such a disservice, and also the story and Diana herself such a disservice, not to make it physical and taste it for yourself, because she just was so, not to sound basic, alive. She just came out to here. She just, like, in every picture, even when she doesn't feel good, she's just vibrating. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain people that just are live wires. And there's no way to do a perfect impression of a live wire. You know what I mean? You have to kind of, yeah, put your body, soul, mind, heart into it. And yeah, I couldn't play Princess Diana perfectly. There was only ever going to be a sort of combination of the two of us.
And I have to ask as well, you know, this film is so internalized for Diana. I mean, we follow her. It's her that we're with. The other members of the royal household are almost on the periphery. We don't even necessarily, you know, see them in center frame.
Yeah.
I wonder how essential it was when you're kind of telling a story like this to have a collaborator and a director like Pablo, who's right there with you, you know, who's by your side in this kind of internalized world.
It was so important. I mean, well, she's so isolated, so alone. Naturally, when you feel so at odds with your environment, you start to put walls up and you start to kind of self-protect. And my self-protection and my sort of go-to default walls that I put up when I feel scared or alone probably look a lot different to hers. And so what was fucking wonderful about Pablo was that I've never felt more accompanied by a person. And, you know, we talked and talked, but I feel like the most fruitful exchanges were emotional and unspoken, and his confidence in me sometimes was ridiculous. And yeah, I just felt never alone. And so I could pretend instead of actually feeling that way, because at that point you can't give a performance. Yeah, so I think the relationship that Pablo and I had was indelibly one of the, I think it's just one of the most ephemeral exchanges I've ever had with a director. It's hard to put your finger on why, but I think we both were drawn to this like moths to a flame. And we both kept going, wait, don't burn alive. And then he would get too close to the flame, and you know, we would just sort of keep each other in this little spot that was perfect to finish the movie. Yeah. And like sustain.
Well, you mentioned The Crown earlier. I mean, obviously, you know, since you shot, we've seen Emma Corrin's portrayal of Diana. You know, and The Crown is very much a sort of a show by Brits, you know, and there's a very specific kind of love for Diana in Britain that's even more intense, if it's possible, than anywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how you just felt about kind of, you know, you mentioned the word outsider earlier, you know, coming to this story, which is very sensitive to Brits, very specific to Brits, yeah. You know, whether it helped you bring a new perspective on it, or whether, you know, it required that you be careful in any way. Mm.
I think I really only have to be careful now. On the movie, you can only do the best that you can, and you can only be as honest as a given moment prescribes. I think, you know, everyone has their version of this story. Everyone's written a memoir, everyone's done an interview, or, you know, even as outsiders, everyone has their opinion about what happened. Nobody knows what's happened. Even if you try and have an impression of a close friend's relationship, behind closed doors, you really don't know what's going on. And so because she was such a enlightening and, you know, such a sort of a born savior for other people, I'm sure people are incredibly invested. I'm just as invested. I have my own opinions. Everyone else has theirs. That's kind of it. I mean, it's a complicated subject, and I'm sure that the terrain the terrain is probably just riddled with bombs, but I'm just going to try and run through.
On that lovely note, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, see ya.
Thank you, and congratulations.